Good afternoon, and it is truly a wonderful afternoon, I pray. Not for those on our some parts of our southern border who are experiencing hurricanes, or nor those on our western coast who are still experiencing fires. But we will pray for all of them that they are well, even though they are up against some challenges. In the Muslim community, we have a series of conversations going on, sometimes antithetical ones. They're in disagreement over African American Muslims and activism, but also comments for those who are not African American, yet American Muslims, about what to think about what's going on in the African American community. This afternoon, I am so honored to have with me Mr. Jihad Saleh, who has gone to two of the nation's most prestigious non-Black institutions, UCLA for his undergraduate degree and Princeton for a master's degree. So, given those credentials, he is based in Washington, D.C., and Jihad is an anti hunger and anti poverty advocate on our Capitol Hill who is raising Muslim voices in political environments. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Critical Talk.
Wa alaikum, good professor. It's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to be on.
Sorry, I had to get rid of those extra ears. It's 90 something degrees here in Chicago, and the thought of 90 something degrees just makes me uncomfortable.
Well, I hear you loud and clear.
We have so many issues. And first of all, I guess a good place to start, and we have so many political groups. What is the current state of African American and Black American Muslim political participation, given that we have such a critical election? And this election, I want to talk about that it's not just the election of the president. There are many elections going on depending upon states, and we haven't paid any attention to that. But what is the current state? Not what we want to do, not what we should have been doing. Where are we on August 26, 2020?
Excellent question, Doctor. And I just want to first say that I'm speaking on my own behalf. Quite often, people reference me or know my work with Islamic Relief USA, the organization I do advocacy for on Capitol Hill. But I want to say today I'm speaking on behalf of my own self, my own experience. But I believe that my anti-poverty and humanitarian work aligns with this humanitarian work, doesn't veer, far apart. But I want to be clear on what I'm saying is my own perspective. Now, You've asked a very a daunting question in the sense, because there can never be one particular or specific response or answer on such a broad community, a diverse community. And yes, even African-American Muslim, Black Muslims have diversity amongst ourselves.
Right.
And then when we're talking about what is the political context, what is the level of engagement, what is going on politically in the African-American, the Black Muslim community, it's not that could be itself an hour or 2 hour long question. But I'll try to give some sweeping generalities, which will always be imperfect in themselves.
Right.
Now, when we speak about, let's talk about are we talking about at a national level? Are we talking about at a state level? Are we talking at the local level? Where are we talking?
I just shot at all of those.
Oh, now I want to say the history of African-American Muslims, and particularly over the last 40 years, I don't want to say particularly after the transition, particularly after Imam Al-Deen Muhammad made the transition after the passing of his father, may God bless his soul, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the increasing inclusion of a larger swath of African-American Muslims in the political space was very much part of the mission of Imam Al-Deen Muhammad. Being civically engaged, providing civic leadership in interfaith. Imam Al-Deen Muhammad, and particularly his community, were at the forefront of what today we call interfaith engagement. And I'm not just talking about I'm Muslim, you're Christian, we're all okay. But no, actually saying, how do we work together to face the troubles, the struggles that we have at a local level and a societal level? And as I understand it, the good Imam always focused on the issues of poverty, education, business, economic development, and also increasingly kind of the moral questions of the day. And I think that's very pertinent today as we see a lack of moral guidance and leadership at the highest levels in today's government, at least in particularly in the executive branch. But in that, I would say we have had a robust and healthy engagement, particularly at local levels. African-American Muslims, regardless of what camp or sect, if we want to use these terms, have been very much elected officials, appointed officials, members of commissions at state level, and particularly city and county levels throughout the country. I mean, whether it be, Brother Larry Shaw, who was a state assembly member in North Carolina during the 2000s, as an example. And I remember missing a name of a good brother down in Texas and Mississippi during the 90s. But there has been consistent city level engagement where we've had Muslim Americans who have been city council members, county supervisors, state assembly members, state senate members, and broad engagement and participation. Now, that's just formal politics, which is important. We need to have people in public office, and particularly we need Muslim Americans and African-American Muslim in health departments, food security agencies, school, and definitely in the United States, education is very much a local and state level policy issue. Having Muslim Americans engage on these issues that impact our communities. Now, let's not be fooled. Not all Black Muslims are poor. Not all Black Muslims are struggling in the inner city hoods. But no doubt, African American communities are historically largely a part of, or at least tangent to, large Black majority urban cities. And these are very much part of our issues, much are part of our concerns. It's very hard to separate what is Black Muslim and non-African American Muslim issues. Even if many of us, like myself, who's a convert, I cannot abstract myself from these concerns when my own family members who are living in these conditions, in poverty or facing poor education, these are concerns of mine then. And it's also to always remember, I think I should have started off by saying, when I'm speaking as an anti-poverty advocate, anti-hunger advocate, as a Muslim American, and particularly as an African American Muslim, the Muslim tradition always starts with the community of Muhammad. Always, our priorities focus on the need of those at the bottom. We are a social justice community. And then that's also the beauty of the African American Muslim experience. We're both, as Muslims, it is in our tradition to always stand with, to amplify the voices and concerns of the oppressed, whether they be ourselves, family members, or other communities we have to stand with. And then two, as a distinct African American Black community in the United States, who has a long history and defining struggle that has gone globally, that people are inspired by, we are both a duality as a Islamic and a Black freedom struggle community. So we always start off at the base level.
Do you think that some of the reasons for this current status, and the current status, as you've just very well stated, is that we are sprinkled across some agencies? There's not enough sprinkling, and then we're totally absent in some other places. Is that due to a lack of focus on our part, or is it because we haven't been privy to the strategies that would get us there?
Excellent question and excellent observation. That was my next step, going from the local and state, where I think we've had a robust level of engagement, particularly in cities where we've been historically present, like Philadelphia, Chicago, Detroit, and many of the Black Belt states in the South. We have been active. But at a national level, at a federal level, we're proud to say that at least we know publicly, the first two Muslim Americans and 3 of the 4 first Muslim Americans are of Black or African heritage. And no doubt we are very proud of Congressman Keith Ellison, who served with distinction for 12 years. And I had the privilege of working on Capitol Hill in Congress. We both walked on the Capitol Hill the same year in 2007. And good Congressman Carson. And now we have Sister Ilhan Omar from Minnesota, who recently was one of the first 2 Muslim American women to be representatives. Now, they do not represent the Muslim community in their capacity. They represent the districts where they're held from in Minnesota. Congressman Ellison was from Minnesota. It was from Minnesota. Now, Sister Ilham represents the district where Congressman Ellison was once a member, and then Congressman Carson. They represent a diversity of people, but they have made us proud in the sense that they represent the best values of Muslim Americans to engage a wide spectrum of issues. So I know we need to take a quick break, and I'll follow back up on that once we come back.
Thank you. Okay, but let me ask this question. Since you kind of mentioned 3 of the more well-known Congress people, do you happen to know the influence that they have had in the Black Caucus? Because there's a side of this we don't ever see. And even though, second question, they are representing specific congressional districts, all the Muslims everywhere want to point on them and at them and pull on their coattails, which I know has got to be overwhelming. So if you take the first question first.
I would say that Congressman Keith Ellison was a champion in the House of Representatives. There is a periodical called CQ on Capitol Hill, which does annual rankings of the most respected members of each party.
Is that Congressional Quarterly?
Correct, Congressional Quarterly magazine. And I remember a couple years ago, before Congressman Ellison decided to leave his position and run for Attorney General for Minnesota, Congressman Ellison was consistently ranked based upon his principles and his stances, respected amongst his Democratic members. Congressman Ellison was not just a member, but he was actually the co-chair for the Congressional Progressive Caucus for, I believe, 2 years, helping to define and lead, I think, nearly over 90 members of Congress who were part of this caucus that put forth very focused economic, social justice policy issues. So he was very much, even though he was a Muslim and there was only 2 Muslims at that time, he punched above his weight and within a relatively short period of time becoming a prominent member, a vocal member, and a leading member, and a Congressional Black Caucus member.
But what happened when he should have been the chair of the DNC? And immediately we get racism rearing its head and, in all of these deliberations and the choice of a man who people don't even know his name. The only thing they know is that he's white.
Well, I know that Congressman Ellison made a good charge, a good effort, and actually showed very well outly, to the extent where even current Democratic National Committee Chairman Tom Perez, who ended up winning the position, had to admit and make a concede saying that he would be that at that time, Congressman Ellison would be his second deputy or some position immediately right below him. That there was such a groundswell of support for him. The division was so close in the party. You couldn't say it was a mandate for Tom Perez to be the chair. So no, Congressman, again, it is showing that there are various wings. The Democratic Party has different elements, like any political party. And we see that even Sister Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, again, even within her first 2 years of being a member of Congress, her along with our Muslim sister, Rashida Tlaib, Congresswoman Tlaib from Michigan, from Detroit area, along with Congresswoman Ilana Presley from Boston, and along with Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez from Queens, they have this thing called the Squad. Strong women of color who are champions of very progressive policy issues around, economic empowerment, environment, racial justice. And so we see that even now, even though Congressman Ellison has moved on as Attorney General and still plays a prominent role in the Democratic Party as Attorney General, as the first Muslim Attorney General, Congressman Ilhan Omar and Rashid, though she's African American, but Arab American, who represents a Black majority district and recognizes that and consistently works with Black leadership, Muslim and otherwise, in her district. But Ilhan is also a champion on very progressive issues. And again, they have these 4 women, including 2 Muslim women, have exerted more public social influence than most new members of Congress have. No one can deny that. Now, where you fall on the line of whether you agree with the policies or not, that's another issue.
Yeah.
But in the context, they have raised the bar on key issues around green jobs, racial justice. Even Sister Ilhan Omar was championing a bill to make sure that children were not being shamed in schools because they could not pay they were in arrears on their free reduced lunch, where they still may have to pay a little bit and their parents didn't have money. The reason why
how do we in the general public even know about which bills are being championed?
Well, Congressman, that is a daunting task. They say each Congress lasts 2 years. We are currently right now in the 116th Congress. They say approximately 10 to 15,000 pieces of legislation get introduced every Congress. Who can keep up with that?
But we don't know about any.
Now, give me a moment to elaborate on this. The reason why I raised this issue on Congressman Ilhan's bill to stop shaming of children who can't afford their meals is because, I'll be honest, many Muslim organizations that do advocacy in DC consistently stand or want to be behind Congresswoman Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib when they make statements against Islamophobia, against the Muslim ban, and issues on Palestine, Israel, or things such as that. No doubt, these are important issues. These are issues that Muslim Americans of African descent are concerned with, but they may not always be the primary existential issues that we face on a day-to-day. So when Sister Ilhan Omar introduced her bill on stopping shaming of children at schools, she called for an interfaith group of faith leaders in DC to stand behind her on Capitol Hill. And you know how many, I think of approximately 15 to 20 faith leaders who stood behind her with the Capitol behind her. You know how many were Muslim? 1. It's not a shameless plug, but it was from Islamic Relief, because that's the work we do. So the concern is, the important question we have to ask ourselves, particularly as Black Muslims, as Muslim Americans who are facing, many of us, the challenges of economic impoverishment, degradation, lack of access, poor education. Why are issues that are consistently framed in the media on Capitol Hill always framed in the context in national security, terrorism, foreign affairs, or I don't even know what Islamophobia is in the sense in a policy discussion? Is that when a Muslim sister when Walmart tells a Muslim woman to take her headscarf off? Yes, I'm against that. That should be dealt with. But the thing is, Muslim Americans, and not just Black Muslims, Muslim Americans, over 40% face poverty. Let's think about the real reality of even the new American Muslim communities that have come post 9/11 from Afghanistan, from the Middle East, from Africa. They're not the stereotypical engineer doctor Muslims that we saw coming from 1965 to about 1995. The majority now are refugees, are part of a global labor migration movement where you see Yemenis in Central California picking grapes with Latino brothers and sisters. They're working, hustling, driving cabs in Queens. They're pumping gas on the 95 in New Jersey, trying to eke out a existence, keeping the lights on and food on their table. And we haven't even got to COVID. I'm talking about just over the last 20 years.
Well, wait a minute.
So the question is
let me since you bring it up, what do you see on the horizon with no stimulus money, potential problems with welfare monies, no food coming to food pantries, rising food prices, losses of housing.
Eh, Let's take that question after this break. That's a big one.
Okay, go for it.
Wonderful question. Yes. How does COVID and all the related economic insecurity, disruption of life with social distancing, the loss of jobs, or underemployment, or how even in the context of racial justice that has overlapped with the killing of George Floyd, and the righteous rage in response that many communities, including African American Muslim communities and other ethnic communities, have responded to rightfully. But sometimes that does disrupt the food supply chain to the market.
Right.
So again, and I believe you have a diverse audience when you listen, who's tuning into this. But again, ask yourself why, whether it's external from the media or government people want to say, oh, let me talk to you about terrorism. And I'm saying, why do you want to talk to me about, I don't know anything about terrorism. Go talk about someone else's terrorism. Or why do Muslim organizations consistently, many of them, continue that cycle, perpetuating only responding to these issues instead of the actual existential issues that face the vast majority of Muslims, that 30, the 40, or 50 that live near or close to poverty. Let's be real. Most Muslims in America are not living hog to hog out in this vanilla suburbs. They're living in the chocolate cities, whether they like it or not, around these inner city rings, struggling like most other Americans day to day.
Those people live in inner city when there's no stimulus money, when there's no food being put in, they're going to migrate out to those outer rings because they're going to. Well, they're going to trek.
So, what we see definitely, if we want to just say as an example of how COVID has disproportionately impacted our communities, whether it be people of color or Muslim, and the overlap. Our good sister Camila Rashad at the Muslim Wellness Foundation in Philadelphia helped start the Black Muslim COVID Coalition, which has done some very important research and data on how has, particularly up in the northern east states, New York, Philadelphia, the initial states that got hit hard, how they impacted. And what we have consistently seen, Black Muslims and those working class, poor, new American, whether it be Afghan, African, or whatever, who living in inner city Philadelphia, living in the boroughs of New York, living now in the wards of Houston or whatever it is in Southside Chicago, they are victims again of already the systemic racism and lack of health care, food, not just food deserts, but health deserts and other issues that make them susceptible to COVID and the ramifications. Let's not believe consistently where people are saying, yes, the Muslim community is impacted by COVID because they're all doctors and they're responding in the hospitals and they're catching it. I don't deny that. A lot of Muslim Americans are healthcare professionals, and we respect and we praise the work that they do. But the vast majority of Muslims who are susceptible, who are on the front line, they're driving your metro buses. They're picking up your garbage. They're cleaning they're cleaning the hospitals. They're running small businesses in communities where people, the local bodega, to get food, and they're making themselves susceptible to provide a service to you that is not glitzy and glamour and does not have a financial reward and does not have often the healthcare and financial security if they get sick. They're working and providing food at fast food joints.
There's a shortage of food. The trucks aren't coming in. The farmers have dumped food because they couldn't get it transported away. Stimulus is bogged down in Congress. What are people going to do? Landlords have done an end run on moratoriums on evictions. What do you see happening? What kind of groundswell do we need to be involved in?
Now, let me mention two initiatives. First and foremost, what is the Muslim American community doing in response to COVID? Now, I want to be straightforward. This is research that comes out of Indiana University at the Center for Muslim Philanthropy. Now, the vast majority, the largest Muslim organizations in the country are not the civil liberties organizations. They're not the anti-terrorism organizations. The largest Muslim organizations by far are the humanitarian, anti-poverty, anti-hunger organizations, like Islamic Relief, like ICNA Relief, like UMR, and so forth. This is where the Muslim American community puts its money at national level, not the counterterrorism, not the civil liberties. But what's most important, based on the research from Indiana University, is actually most Muslim charitable dollars don't go to national organizations. They stay local in the mosque, at the food pantry, at the local Muslim-run health clinic, these type of organizations. We have seen an uptick in Muslim giving in these type of organizations at the local level and even the national level to respond to COVID. And again, because I'm familiar, I'll say Islamic Relief has made a commitment at this point over $8 million to COVID response, where we are funding currently over 210 organizations in over 35 states and 2 territories that are doing food security, food pantry programs. They're doing emergency grants or zakat to Muslim and non-Muslim to help people keep the lights on. They're doing PPE delivery to healthcare professionals. And just recently, we even started a funding grant for organizations that are responding to domestic violence, because that is increased, unfortunately, because of the social isolation of families. Yeah. So Muslim communities are responding along with Christian and Jewish and secular organizations in the anti-poverty and anti-hunger space. But let's be real, sister. Let's not fool ourselves to think that we are going to food pantry our way out of hunger in COVID or even before COVID. No. So what does that mean? Let me get to it. Let me say this. The second point I want to say, Doctor, the second point was that was our response. We know as a society, not just as Muslims, but as citizens and as stewards of our nation who elect these officials, that any type of healthcare, food security, and economic response must be driven by the U.S. government in a concerted effort using our tax dollars that we as citizens give to the government. There needs to be increasing of food security programs through SNAP, formerly known as food stamps. There needs to be increased coordination of healthcare response and testing. There needs to be, yes, moratoriums on rental or mortgage payments. That's not something the private or the nonprofit sector can do, when especially already in normal times, food pantries and anti-hunger and soup kitchens only feed 1 out of every 20 people who go hungry in America. We're not going to now feed more when it's 1 out of every 40, because the number has gone up. So why I say that is Muslim Americans need to be advocating and lobbying to our members of Congress. But the sad state of the fact is, and the reason why I know, is because this is what I do for a living. There is
get people to tell me what lobbying. Do we lobby through our aldermen? Do we lobby on the phone directly to that congressional office? How do we push to help you on the Hill?
Yes, Capitol is making those calls. Many people want to do these send tweets to your member of Congress or punch a little email and you send it out. As a former congressional staffer who represented food security issues for my congressman, those are important, but nothing is better than a direct meeting. And in the time of COVID, having a direct calling and having a direct meeting over Zoom with your congressman or woman or their staff. And that's what I've been doing for the past 3 months through Islamic Relief. And I'm proud to say our good friends at the Islamic Medical Association of North America and the American Muslim Health Professionals, again, 2 of the leading Muslim organizations in the healthcare space. There are a lot of Muslim doctors, but they have joined on and taken now over 15 meetings with different senators. And remember, these food security issues, these poverty issues, why they're not getting passed is because it's in the Senate. The blockage is in the Senate. Muslims are organizing on anti-poverty, healthcare issues, calling on senators saying, we need you to pass this bill that will expand food stamps. And this is something very new in the Muslim community. And we're getting
Gotta
physicians.
find out who's running who's up for another term in the Senate and get rid of them.
Oh, now you're getting real with the sister. No doubt. I'll say this very briefly. We have been focusing on senators who are in tight races, who tend to not support the type of issues and saying, this is what our community is doing in Phoenix. This is what our community is doing in Philadelphia. This is our community doing in Baltimore. How about you vote for this if you want to gain good favor with the Muslim and people of color, just so that you really care about your constituents that are struggling with poverty and hunger during this COVID crisis?
No, that sounds like a winner, because I think folks forget about those senators. You know, we have a majority that we need to maintain in Congress. I mean, in the House, but we need to make some serious inroads in that Senate.
If people are willing, if you have people who are watching from this show from the states of Arizona with Senator McSally, people in Georgia, I know there's a lot of Muslims in Georgia, with Governor Perdue, or Congressman Portman in Ohio, these may be senators who are running tight races where they may be willing to listen to you finally as Black and brown people and social justice advocates on these key issues. Yes, tight races and the need for more votes sometimes may soften up the brain to be open to certain positions. We need people to call, and not just as Muslims, but in coalition with anti-hunger programs, with Christian and Jewish social justice organizations who are lobbying. Believe me, the Christian and Jewish organizations that are against hunger are calling every day. And it's our role to help.
Yeah. Let's take another quick break, and then I'm going to come back and talk about influence. And kind of analyzing your speech, and not that you've given a speech, but I mean your speech talk. What are your suggestions for distinguishing between effective influence and something else? We got a lot of name droppers, but when you ask what is the quid pro quo, we don't get much. Well, I know so and so. Well, what are they doing to help you in what you're advocating? Well, you know.
You raise a good point, and I think this is as I've been now in DC for 15 years, and working on Congress, now working for the nation's largest Muslim organization in general as its lead advocate and I would say lobbyist, and in the work that I do in that work, being a coalition partner with some leading organizations such as Catholic Charities, Salvation Army, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. These organizations who've been doing it for a long time. They're not just, love God, but they are hardcore lobbying and advocacy organizations, learning from them. But one thing that I learned is in DC is you got to quickly learn, and this is true across the board, who's just talking and who can actually deliver, right? But then that leads to the question about, well, what is access or influence? Sometimes Muslim Americans and a lot of people, they confuse access to a member of Congress or to a government official with influence. Some people pay the $5,000 check to go have a rubber chicken dinner with a member of Congress or a public official and they get to line up with 200 other people and stroll by and take a picture. Then they put the picture on the wall. But until the next dinner, 2 years later, they don't get to see the member of Congress or that official and have no influence on what he or she does. But they just gave their hard-earned money.
Right.
Now, what is the influence? Influence is actually building relation, getting in front of, and continually advocating, providing good nasiha. Now, members of Congress and city council members have a lot of constituents.
Know what nasiha means.
Nasiha means advice.
Members
saying we giving good advice.
Okay.
Now, Muslims must be fair. I'm not speaking here as a partisan hack. I'm saying whether it's Democrat or Republican or independent, we need to be able to say when a Republican puts forth a good piece of legislation that's beneficial to people, if they can, we'll support it, we'll endorse it. And even if a Democrat puts forth a piece of legislation that hurts the vulnerable, does not support, equitable justice for everyone, we'll be against it. So give credit where credit is due, and give good nasiha or advice when they're doing something wrong. Right. That's what we need to do. And if you don't have the ability to get that message to and occasionally influence, then you're just paying for access for a picture and not having actually impact on policy. Now, there's a lot of ways to do that by bringing votes, pooling, working in coalition with other organizations. But I think what's important, not only with the access and influence differences, also, who are you engaging? Do you recognize, are you meeting someone who is actually just the PR person? Are they putting you off to meet with just the person who does interfaith engagement, who does not make decisions? Or are you actually speaking to an operational decision maker in an office or in a government decision? Someone who actually has the power over policy and legislation. Very different. A lot of Muslims get caught up.
Figure that out.
Well, that's a good question. If their title usually has somewhere in it says public relations, interfaith engagement, or field representative, they may not be the operational decision maker. But I will say this: you should respect them. You should engage them. They could be the gatekeeper that determines who can eventually meet with the congresswoman, the senator, or the operational decision maker. So often, sometimes these people want to see, they're the ones who are determined to say, yes, is this person just talking, or can they really deliver? Do they make sense of what they're saying? So I'm not saying to neglect, and sometimes those PR or public relations or community liaisons are really young people straight out of college. Don't disrespect them. They can be the gatekeeper to that operational decision maker. Right. But if you only consistently meet with only the PR person, only with the interfaith person at the annual Eid event at the mosque, at the annual community fair where they have a table outside at the local annual fair to hand out brochures, then yes, I would tend to say that you don't actually have influence. You're just getting access to people who represent, but you need to be consistent in engaging and to get to those people that actually, people with titles such as chief of staff, legislative director, senior policy advisor, or more important, titles like senator or member of Congress or secretary of state or the director of health department. That's who has the operational decision-making ability, not the, and I'm a person who values engaging with the faith outreach people, but knowing that they are just the entrance to the more important people, and you cultivate those relationships.
Well,
don't fall for the okie doke of just the public relations person. Yes.
You and I have talked quite a bit about the fact that there's so many webinars, so many WebEx meetings, so many Zoom meetings, and we're tired. And then even if we try to schedule to get on as many as we can, we're still missing critical and necessary information. So I want you to talk about a little bit like an advertisement for what you and I are cooking up for the future. Because I know that there are teams, I don't know if everybody even knows that there are teams in battleground states who are coming together, you know, getting people registered, getting the vote out, educating people, some, you know, who still need to be educated about the political process. But we've decided that we're going to take three themes and try to work them through. So at least space on Critical Talk on Muslim Network TV, we can begin to have a more collaborative conversation. And then in the few weeks we have remaining before the election, maybe at least one or two, um, perhaps potentially life-saving town hall meetings, because I think people are seriously confused. I mean, seriously confused.
Well,
So you want to speak to that?
I think we need, we're scheduled for a brief break, and we'll come right back to that because I know people want it. Let's give them what they want, like the OJ said.
Okay, so we're going to try to make over the next several weeks an effort at collaboration so that folk get to hear about what's happening in battleground states, what's happening with Black Muslim and Black Christian initiatives, and meet some of the people who've decided to get beyond. And then we're going to take a look to the future because it shouldn't be the end of our activism, no matter what happens.
Sure. Well, let me give me a few minutes to try to quickly go over this important initiative. Yes, we are, if people didn't notice, we are in the midst of an election, and I would say very much the soul of the nation is at stake.
It is.
And I want to preface this and say that in my own personal capacity, not through my professional work or my employer, but in my own professional capacity, I have made myself available to advise, to give nasiha, good advice, as I've done over the past 3 campaigns, going back to President Obama and to the campaign, to provide guidance through their faith engagement office teams, through their African-American engagement teams, and so forth, how to help them engage Muslim American communities, and in particular with this election, African-American and Black Muslim communities. So I'm going to say, and Dr. McLeod, you know this, Dr. Al-Deen, is that African-American Muslims, Black Muslims, when it comes to electoral politics at the national level, we are constantly neglected. We are not recognized. They act like we don't exist, even though the key issue is in the overall Muslim community, the most consistent, the most important, and the most strategically placed voting bloc of Muslims is the African-American Muslim voting bloc. Philadelphia, Detroit, Milwaukee, cities where clearly Clinton lost. Those are urban core Black communities where the African-American Muslim community is a significant member of and could be the percentages of a win or lose situation for Joe Biden. And I'm happy to say that many in his campaign recognize this. Now, the problem is what we've seen over the past, during the Obama administration, and I'm sad to say probably during a Clinton campaign, that, again, no one engages the Black Muslim community. Why? For various reasons. And this is not a point of a conflict or disrespect. I respect it. Historically, in the past 20 years, when campaigns have engaged Muslim communities, they primarily engage the New American, South Asian, Arab, Turkish communities in the suburbs. They they see the Muslim community primarily and firstly through the prism of immigrant Muslim, South Asians, and Arabs.
Right.
Okay. Now, so for some reason, we're not Muslim enough for them because we're not foreigners or recent immigrants and new Americans.
Literally.
Now, the flip side is we're not even engaged as Black Americans. Why? Because not all, but historically, a major portion of Black engagement through campaigns is through the Black church.
Right.
I once had someone say to me I'm not going to say which campaign, but a gentleman said to me who did faith engagement. I asked him, "Are you engaging the African American Black Muslim community?" And he said to me, he says, "Yes. When we go to the Black churches, we're engaging them." And I said, and I looked at him, I'm like, "No, you're not, because Black Muslims are not the Black churches. They're in the mosque.
Right.
They don't know the difference."
Right.
So again, we're not Christian, so they don't even know the mosque is sometimes next to the church, and then when they walk out, they could come and visit us.
Right.
So I'm proud to say and happy to say that in just the last month or two, as I've made myself available along with a larger growing network of African American Muslim imams, civic leaders, African American Muslims who are public officials, social media influencers, we are making ourselves available as a national network and increasingly as state Black leadership collectives to engage the Biden campaign, not to just say, "Here, we're here to give you our vote."
Yeah, exactly.
But to say, yes, we know we don't want Donald Trump. We don't want none of that. That's a hot mess and people's lives are at stake.
Right.
But at the same time, we're just not here to give you our vote. Like any other community, you need to respect our vote, recognize our issues, address our concerns, and then also, if we vote for you, how will we be represented, not just at some symbolic rubber chicken dinner, but
Right.
where will qualified, Black Muslim Americans be represented in the Health and Human Services Department, the
Right.
Department of Agriculture, Small Business Administration, Commerce. I don't want to, because I'll say this. During President Obama's administration, I tracked this. Approximately 40 to 45 Muslim Americans were appointed who served as appointees by President Obama. You know how many were Black?
1, 2.
You were close. Now, a community that makes up somewhere between 25 to 40% of the Muslim community, and who are the ones who actually bring the vote, win the election,
Or not represented.
are not represented.
Right.
And not only that, the vast majority of those Muslim Americans who were in government, they were in foreign State Department, Homeland Security,
Yeah.
national security issues. And I'm asking again, why are we constantly perceived as of value only with foreign affairs issues and counterterrorism and civil liberties issues?
But the other side of that is they let themselves be only concerned with that.
Well, we're changing that.
Yeah.
This is the first time we are being very concerted as a informal social network saying we want to engage. Yes, we want Biden to win, but we need to be heard. We need to be engaged and appreciated. And so there's being moves made to make that happen, where specifically some of your viewers may have been on some previous events where the Biden campaign engages Muslim communities, but always the very first thing they speak about again is Muslim ban, Islamophobia, whatever that is, and Palestine, Israel, when most Black Muslims on those calls are saying, when is he going to talk about economic security? When is he going to talk about COVID?
Yeah.
Some people act like Muslims are not dying of COVID. We have time to be worried about something 3,000 miles away instead of 3 miles away.
Right.
And so it is very much the role and responsibility, as it has always been in the Muslim community, for Black Muslims to be the moral vanguard, to address the issues that actually, again, not just Black, but poor South Asian, poor Afghan, poor Syrian refugees who are living in urban core and Black and brown conditions in our communities in Queens, in Chicago, in South LA, in Fifth Ward. They're not living out in the suburbs. They're facing the same situations we have, and they're facing the same dire straits that Black, brown, Latino communities are facing. They themselves have no time to worry about Muslim ban because they're worried about putting food on their table.
Exactly.
So this is what we're doing. And going forward, we're looking to host some events with the campaign that address specifically the African-American Muslim experience. And I would like to believe that actually even other Muslims will find more meaning in hearing about and participating in these events when the African-American Muslim vanguard represents the issues that address the vast majority of what Muslims are concerned with, along with social justice, Christian and Jewish and Latino and Asian partners who we work with. And so it is only to the detriment of the Muslim American community when there is not a robust, active African-American Muslim component. And we will no longer allow that to be the case. And particularly in this campaign, and I would say it is in the works. Be ready over these next 10 weeks of increasingly opportunities of not just Black Muslims, but our brothers and sisters who live amongst us to be recognized, to be engaged, and to their issues to be addressed by the campaign. And if that's the case, then we will be happy to give most of us, not all Muslims and not all Black Muslims, vote Democrat or so forth. But the important issue is why we're doing this, because yes, we do need to mobilize our Black Muslim communities as part of the larger Black communities in those core 15 states. And I'll end it off because I know we need to take a break, but a lot of these efforts are being taken place in those core 10 to 15 states where we're building these African-American leadership groups who are engaging at the state level. I'll name them quickly. Ohio.
We got to hurry up, Ohio,
Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Florida, Texas, North Carolina, Virginia, and Georgia.
Let me say this. This has been Critical Talk with Professor Aminah Al-Deen, and I've had a wonderful Too Fast hour with Jihad Saleh and all of his wonderful insight, but also knowledge and evidence for things that we need to pay attention to. Thank you, and we'll meet again tomorrow night talking about sacred activism.
Dr. Nasser, one last thing. If you want to be involved with this process, please reach out to, you can find me at Jihad F Saleh or on YouTube. I'm sorry, at Facebook. We love to bring you in. If you're in those states, reach out to me or through this with Dr. McLeod, and we'll happy to bring you on as part of that Black leadership engagement in those critical states, particularly if you're an imam, a faith leader, a civic leader, an elected official in the Black Muslim community. We need you to help to build that political power for us to be represented and have our place in the next Biden administration. Thank you.
Thank you.